So I want to offer my take on Trump's plans for this new triumphal arch in Washington, D.C., and what I would advocate instead. So this arch is basically, it's been called the Arc de Trump, or I like to call it, we have the Arc de Triomphe at home. That's basically what it is. It's kind of like an inferior copy of the Arc de Triomphe. Like when you look at the design, it is so similar to the Arc de Triomphe that it's just a flagrant ripoff, but lacking in detail, at least on the arch itself. The only way in which it's more detailed is on the top of the arch, where you have a bunch of golden statues, which are not on the top of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. But when you look at the arch itself, there's a lot of places where further statuary could be placed that's instead just sitting vacant, like on the sides of the arch. And it looks kind of a bit boring and minimalist in those areas. That said, I think the biggest problem with the arch, if it was built from an architectural standpoint, is I almost guarantee it would look fake and G-slur, because they'd probably use a bunch of modern materials, modern methods, and it would just have that like fake look where everything's a bit too smooth, a bit too, I don't know. And it's not just because it's new, it is the materials and methods. Because even if you look at, say, for instance, different reconstructions of buildings that were destroyed in World War II, some of them look a lot better than others. And it's not just because of the age, it's because in some cases they used more traditional materials and methods, whereas in other cases they did not. So frankly, I think that's a major concern too. But to be honest, the main problem is simply the arch itself, because I just don't think it's what Washington, D.C. or America as a whole needs. And I think it reflects a certain issue with how much of the right approaches traditional architecture, is that I think there's just too much of a focus on monumental buildings and not enough on neighborhoods. Because I think when you look at the most beautiful cities, it's not just the monumental buildings, it's the neighborhoods that really make them. If you have a city with only the monumental buildings but without beautiful neighborhoods, it's just not as beautiful as a city with beautiful neighborhoods. And I think part of the reason for this is because a lot of the right sees historic neighborhoods as being kind of like left-coded, like shit libby. And there's some truth to that. Most of these traditional neighborhoods, like walkable neighborhoods with historic architecture, are full of people who vote for left-wing parties. At least in the US and Canada, that is true. Dense urban cities do tend to be that way, including historic ones, also including more modern ones like Vancouver or Portland or Seattle. But still, I will grant, yes, there is some truth to this. And it's I think some of these right-wingers just want cities to be essentially composed of office space, monuments, maybe cathedrals, but not really homes, because they see these places as inherently being dens of liberalism. But the thing is, even if they are dens of liberalism, these cities do have a certain vibe that can't be replicated elsewhere. And I think that's part of their charm, and that's they do serve a certain functional role in society in that way. They provide a certain experience, a certain ambience that nowhere else can. Furthermore, I still think that it's possible in some of these cases, not all these cases, but it's possible with some of these urban liberals that they vote for left-wing parties because there's no third positionist alternative. I think if you offered them a genuine third positionist alternative, at least some of them would consider it. But the right now is just totally antithetical to urbanism, to the point where, of course, city people aren't going to support it. Why would they support the parties that want to gut public transit, that want to endlessly cater only to suburbanites and ruralites, and to essentially give a great big middle finger to the cities? That's basically what right-wing parties do. So, of course, people in these neighborhoods are going to vote for left-wing parties. I've been tempted to vote for left-wing parties, even though I don't. But I've been tempted to do it because the right are so fucking terrible on certain issues, and especially like public transit, for instance, which is something that is the lifeblood, the backbone of any true city, any true dense or even like high density or even medium density city. So yeah, I mean, frankly, that is my issue. Like this focus on arches and stuff like that at the expense of neglecting neighborhoods. Like if you wanted to make Washington D.C. more beautiful, I think one of the best ways to do it would be build more historic style buildings in the neighborhoods, both residential and commercial. Like go after the any of these people who destroy historic homes and replace them with these ugly modernist shit boxes. Like I don't think it's as big a problem in Washington D.C. as it is in Toronto, for instance. Like when I was in D.C., I didn't see that much of that sort of thing in historic residential neighborhoods. But I'm sure there's probably some of it. Moreover, I think where DC is particularly lacking is in the commercial areas between the mall. Like the mall is basically where all the museums and monuments are. And then a few miles off in most directions, especially like to the north and to the west. And yeah, to the east to an extent also, you have historic neighborhoods, not so much the south. The south is kind of shitty. But you have historic neighborhoods, residential ones, but in between the core, like the mall and the monumental buildings, the monuments, the museums, the White House, the Capitol, the Library of Congress, etc. Between that and historic neighborhoods like Georgetown or like Adams Morgan, all these other areas with I think it's Columbia Heights, yeah, like areas like that with historic like historic homes and stuff like that. Between those, you have a lot of like kind of ugly commercial areas. And again, these aren't even like in DC. I'm not even talking, it's not even residential neighborhoods in this case. It's mostly commercial neighborhoods, but a lot of them are pretty ugly. And it's like you could tear down some of those buildings and build buildings of similar size with traditional facades. And I think that would do a lot to improve the cityscape. And not only that, but also in residential neighborhoods. Like a lot of the residential neighborhoods are pretty good in DC in that regard, but I'm sure some of them have some ugly buildings that stick out like a sore thumb. And I think that would be better. Like improve the homogeneity. Well, not homogeneity, that's not the right word. Improve the harmony of the city. Like it doesn't have to be totally homogenous in terms of the architectural styles, but improve the harmony by focusing on residential and commercial neighborhoods, like essentially between the mall, like to the north side of the mall. Like I'm talking like the downtown area, like downtown DC. It's just kind of ugly. And it's like you could build a lot more historic buildings, like similar size to the buildings that already exist, but with traditional styles. I think that would do a lot more to improve Washington, D.C. than building some new arch. Like, I just think this arch, it's out of the way. It's like, it's not even going to be in DC. It's going to be on the Virginia side. And it just seems like this pale imitation of the Arc de Triomphe. Like, at least the U.S. Capitol building, for instance, it was inspired by European architecture, but it's not like a flagrant ripoff to the extent this arch would be. Or same with the White House. It's not or the Lincoln, well, I guess the Lincoln Memorial is pretty similar to a lot of things, but it's a fairly standard design. Like, I'm not sure if the Lincoln Memorial specifically ripped off one building. Like, I guess it looks kind of like the Parthenon, but I mean, the Parthenon in Athens, but I mean, I wouldn't call it like as much of a one-for-one ripoff as this arch would be of the Arc de Triomphe. Again, Jefferson Memorial, it maybe some Greek building looked very similar to it. I don't know. But it looks kind of similar to the Pantheon in Rome, but not exactly. Like, again, I think this arch, personally, I think it's more of a one-to-one ripoff than any of the existing monumental buildings in Washington, D.C. would be. But moreover, I just think it shows an issue with, insofar as people on the right support traditional architecture, I just think there's this excessive focus on monumental buildings. And I think monumental buildings are important, but they're not the only thing. Like, I think at the end of the day, if you have a city that has a lot of beautiful neighborhoods, but not too many monumental buildings, versus a city that has gorgeous monumental buildings, like astounding ones, but not much in the way of neighborhoods, I honestly think the first city would be more beautiful than the second. And I mean, you have real life examples of that too, frankly. Like, examples of the first might be like, say, Lisbon, for instance, or Porto, or maybe Edinburgh would be an example of the former, or Bruges. Whereas an example of the latter would be like some of these like German cities where they rebuilt the monumental buildings, but they didn't really properly rebuild anything else. And I'd say the former are more beautiful than the latter. Definitely by a long shot. And I mean, obviously, in the former case, you have some monumental buildings, but I'm saying they're not really what the cities are known for. They're more known for like the streetscapes, like the residential commercial buildings that line the streets, as opposed to any like singular monumental buildings that like really stand out. And I'm saying, yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe the best cities have both. Like Paris would be an example of a city that has both in droves, or Rome. But I'm saying if it's one or the other, like I think Washington, D.C. already has a lot of good monumental buildings, but where it could improve is in the neighborhoods, especially like the downtown neighborhood. Like all the neighborhoods basically between the mall and the residential neighborhoods to the north, like the kind of commercial areas in between, like the downtown. And I think, I'm sure there's other areas too that could be improved, but I think that area in particular, because it's like you have the mall, which is beautiful because it's full of beautiful monumental buildings. And then you have neighborhoods like Georgetown, which are beautiful because they're full of beautiful residential buildings. But then you have this hideous, ugly, modernist area in between, which has like serious like 1950s, 60s. It actually kind of looks like post-war German cities because it has a lot of the like same style of architecture, same height of buildings. And it's ugly. And it's like, maybe that would be somewhere to really focus on. Like connect the mall, like have it so you can go from the mall to Georgetown and go through beautiful neighborhoods in between also. Like, to me, that would be more important. I don't know which approach is more expensive. Like, it would be more expensive if you replaced every ugly modernist building there with beautiful historic, like buildings with historic styles. But I'm saying, even if it doesn't have to be every building, but I'm saying an effort to beautify those neighborhoods, in my opinion, would do a lot more for the city than building this fucking arch. I don't know. That's my opinion on that anyway. And frankly, yes, like a lot of the people who support this arch because they're like, oh, it'll help beautify the city, they're the ones largely responsible for choking the life out of these cities. They want to defund transit. They want to defund the cities in general and redirect all the money towards suburbia, towards suburban sprawl, suburban infrastructure. These are the people who go to the city and complain there's not enough parking. It's like, that's because it's a fucking city. Having more parking would destroy the city. It's like parking is the antithesis of a city. Like building a city around the car makes it not a city, but rather a glorified commuting destination for suburbanites. And they don't seem to get this at all. And it's like, okay, granted, I'm not saying it's just the right. Like the left obviously has some of the blame because some of their like super, super lenient on crime policies, frankly, just don't work. And it's like, I'm kind of a centrist when it comes to criminal justice, but it's like, okay, this super woke shit when it comes to like just tolerating crime, it is bad. It is bad for cities. It's not true that every city has an all-time high crime rate right now. That's bullshit. But it is true that there is a certain tolerance of like low-level disorder. Like I'm pretty sure like murder rates are definitely not overall at an all-time high, and robbery and burglary rates, at least officially, have gone down. And like anecdotally, I knew way more people who got robbed like 10, 15, 20 years ago compared to now. Granted, I knew more people period back then compared to now, but still. Nonetheless, like I do think there's some truth to the idea that like I don't think that like major crimes have necessarily gone up, like violent crime or like serious crimes like burglary, but I do think that like there's a certain amount of low-level disorder that has increased. Like just agitated mentally ill people in public, like screaming, making a nuisance of themselves, behaving belligerently. And I'm not saying it's their fault that they're mentally ill, but I'm saying we have to do something about this because it is driving people away from cities. Like, so yeah, I mean, insofar as that, I will agree with the idea that like it's not just it is the right and the left that are both responsible in different ways for cities declining, especially in this decade. Like there has been some amount of decline. I will admit it. I don't think it's as bad as in like the worst days of like the 1970s and 80s where the cities were just shooting galleries. But like, yes, I will say there have been some major problems that have gotten a lot worse in the past few years. And murder rates actually in the United States are lower than they've been in quite a while, especially like in 2025. It's actually remarkable how much has gone down, even though, yes, it's still by far the worst first world country for murder rates. But still, they have improved a lot actually the past year or two. But still, nonetheless, my point is like, broadly speaking, building an Arc de Triomphe ripoff is just putting lipstick on a pig if you're not going to address the underlying issues with the city. Like, if you're just going to like defund transit and redirect money to the suburbs and try to like recreate the 1960s and 50s by building more freeways and more car-centric crap, then it's like you're not solving the problem. In fact, you're making the problem worse, and this Arc de Triomphe is just lipstick on a pig at that point. And that's part of the problem is like the right has largely abandoned cities. They write them off as being like, oh, the people who live there are liberals. It's like, okay, even if it's true that the people who live there are liberals, at least other people come into the cities and enjoy them. And some of those people do take trains into the cities. Even right-leaning people will sometimes do that. And I mean, yeah, there are some right-leaning people in the cities, but they are a minority and often a very quiet one because you kind of have to be in these environments. But yeah, as I've said, like I think the right-left dichotomy is also part of the issue here because, yeah, I mean, I went over that already. But yeah, I guess this is my point here that like, really, this Arc de Triomphe ultimately, it's just lipstick on a pig. If you're gonna keep attacking cities, defunding transit, being anti-transit, being against every single transit project that'll help revitalize cities, like being against the expansion of urbanism, like being against any attempt to like urbanize the inner ring suburbs, being against any attempt to build more transit, and just treating every inch of suburbia as sacred, like Dar al suburbia, like this idea that like no inner ring suburb can ever densify or no mid ring suburb can ever densify. Like it's just stupid. And it's like, if you want a city like Washington, D.C. to flourish, you have to allow it to be a city. And that includes, like, yes, transit. That includes allowing the city to expand. That means, like, yes, some of the inner ring suburbs should be densified or the mid ring suburbs. It means not all the tax money should go towards suburbanites and suburban concerns. It means all these things. And it means, yes, historical preservation, not just of this arch, but also stopping these renovators from destroying historic homes needlessly and replacing them with ugly modernist shit boxes, which is what I see so much of in the historic Victorian parts of Toronto. And again, I don't know how much a problem. When I was in DC, I didn't see too much of that in the neighborhoods I was in. But again, I was mostly just in Georgetown and Capitol Hill, and those are two of the most historic neighborhoods. So like it's probably kind of like Cabbagetown in Toronto, which is the one neighborhood in Toronto where you don't see so much of that thing, the renovators destroying historic buildings. So again, like maybe it's a problem in other neighborhoods in Washington D.C. So yeah, I mean that would be another priority that frankly to me I think is way more important than building some new fancy arch, is ensuring the preservation of historic buildings, both from renovators, but also from decay. Like it's kind of like that's the fragility of historic neighborhoods, is like you have to preserve them from threats on both sides, from these wealthy renovators who destroy these historic buildings and build shit boxes like with like ugly big square glass, massive square glass, like rectangular glass windows, and just that literally like rectangle shaped modernist cubes. And not only that, but like at the other end of the spectrum, you have neighborhoods that just decay and get populated by ghetto elements, ghetto demographics, and also by drug users and such, and become shitholes. And in those cases, often become abandoned or dilapidated. So, yeah, it's a fragile balance where you have to protect the neighborhoods against threats from both ends, from both the wealthy and the poor. Um, I'm not saying poor people in general shouldn't live in these types of neighborhoods, but I'm saying it's a certain type of poor person. Okay. And yes, it exists along racial demographic lines, but it also exists along other lines too, like, say, drug addiction and things of that nature. So, which does include plenty of white people. Like, the drug addiction problem, it's a white problem too. Like, let's be honest. Like, when you see the videos of Kensington in Philadelphia, it's definitely a racial mix. Same with like Skid Row in Los Angeles. So it's like, yes, these homeless, drug addicted people, and also Toronto on the east side, like around Regent Park area. Yeah. Moss Park. Oh, Moss Park is definitely, oh my gosh. Or the downtown east side of Vancouver. Oh my gosh. Or San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, like places that have these drug addiction issues. Like, we have all these types of issues. And I'm saying protecting the cities against these problems, I think, is more important to not just cities themselves, but architecture in general, because all these problems lead to architectural decay on a massive scale. Like, neighborhoods just becoming dilapidated or abandoned, or just becoming total shitholes, covered in graffiti, vandalism, just buildings falling apart, abandoned. Like, it's, in some cases, fires break out, buildings burn down. Like, this kind of shit, preventing this kind of shit, to me, is way more important than building some ripoff of the some inferior ripoff of the Arc de Triomphe. And even if it doesn't look ugly, even if, but against all odds, it actually looks authentic and it actually looks good, and not like some fake and G-slur modernist, like, not even modernist, but like faux traditional arch where it's obvious that they use modern materials. Even if they avoid that, it's like, so what? You could have used that money to things that would help the city on an architectural level a lot better than just this one arch. That's my opinion. And yes, part of the reason is because Trump in general sucks lately. So yes, I do want to countersignal everything he does. But I mean, even if it wasn't Trump, it's like, at the end of the day, I do think this would have more value for the city, what I'm talking about.